Initiative, je nachdem. Auf die Initiative eure, das wäre das klingt doch gut. Würde Frau Seitzel, würde ich jetzt 2 Minuten, 3 Minuten geben, um hierher, dann hatte sie genau 10 Minuten Zeit. Das muss reichen. Und wenn sie dann noch nicht hier ist, das geht auch. Genau, ich finde es nur schön, wenn Sie bei der Vorstellungsrunde, ich keinen leeren Platz vorstelle, was zwar passieren kann, aber Herr Rangers, Sie sind vorbereitet, das sieht gefährlich. Das stimmt. Ein abstraktes Thema. Gut, noch 1 Minute warten. Vielleicht schafft Frau Seitz. Dann da würde ich sagen, hallo und
Hello, everyone, and welcome. The sound system seems to be quite loud. I hope you can all hear me okay, and maybe you've put in your earplugs or not. Welcome to the pavilion of the Book Fair in Frankfurt. It's good to see all of you. It's not a matter of fact in our industry that everyone comes together. We are in the labor battles at the moment. You heard from the strikes in the US, and it was about artificial intelligence taking over their jobs and works. The books and stories were to be written by AI, and people were only meant to be post-editors and correct all the mistakes that the machines commit. The authors, however, stood up. They stood their ground. They asserted themselves. And this is surprising if we look at the history of these labor battles and fights for the industrial action that takes place. And this is very interesting and surprising. But this is just an introduction into these things. But AI is a very current matter. Getty Images is at the moment dealing with the double infusion image producer. 2.5 million images need to be protected. Springer wants to replace their authors by AI, or at least they think they can do so. And this is the last fortress of creative producers or of creators. And we want to resist this. We want to do something against this and talk about these things. We know that the large AI generators of the big development companies earn millions. But where are the photographers, the publishing houses, the authors, and so on? So how do they earn? And this is what we summarize here in our discussion on the Frankfurt Buchmesse. And I would like to welcome all persons present here. I welcome the authors and the Association of German Authors of the Media Group, DFV, and so on. So the title of our session is Artificial Intelligence. Is the algorithm an owner or author? And we want to take a look at this from all points of view, technically, politically, ethically, financially. And I am really happy to see that we have so much expertise here in the front in our panel. And I think the last participant will also come and join us. Let us start with the three of them. At the left, Lena Falkenhagen is the president of the German Association of Authors and Writers. She's also a lector, an author, and she used to be professor at the University of Hamburg for linguistics and the media. I think your professorship has run out of validity, but we need all these titles here today. And also, she gave away some piece of information. She told me she writes fantasy stories, and she has worked for or written for pen and paper. So you are used to the fact that the readers sort of live your stories, they interpret them, and they act them out. But what you cannot stand is fan fiction. That's when your fans continue to work with these stories. I hope, can you all hear me okay? Well, it is because all the other authors, when they create the figures, the characters, I think this is their vision. And the author has a vision herself, something they want to tell. And someone who enters this world, of course, has a different view of vision of the author's world and has not internalized the author's picture. So I don't like the fan fiction that is written about my books, and I don't read other authors' fan fiction. I think it is appropriation of the ownership of another person, the cultural ownership in the works. So I think I can hear your position already, the stance you are taking here today. But I can understand that, of course. And here, number 4, Mina Saitse has joined us. She's a data analyst for many different companies, tech companies, but she's also the founder of Inclusive Tech, Europe's first lobby and consultancy company for these tech issues, and she's a sought-after author and advisor from 10A3 to Spiegel, you name it, all the media companies. And she's also affected by it. Her book, Fairtech, Thinking Digitalization Anew for a Fair Society, is going to be published next week on the 27th of October at Bastei Lübbe Publishing House. So you were not in this author's industrial action that was taken. Well, no, I wasn't, but I'm an advocate of constructivism and how to promote and use technology to the benefit of our everyday life and work. So I was actually busy to update my papers. And this generative AI boom was actually not predictable, even for people who have been working in this area for many years. I've been working for more than 7 years in the tech industry, and I have not forecasted things like ChatGPT, even if I knew that from a technological point of view, it's more an evolution than a revolution. In 2017 already, Google has worked with a transformer architecture that is used for ChatGPT. So technologically seen, it was not that exciting for me because I have seen many projects in computer linguistics, actually. But ChatGPT was a very powerful application that was in a position to revolutionize the human-machine interaction. It was not abstract anymore. It was human. You could relate to it. Some of my friends even said they think ChatGPT understood them better than I understood my friends. So that was quite impressive for me. Well, very interesting aspect here, the question of democracy in the machine. And this also speaks for authorship, right? And I would also like to welcome here to our panel the other 50% of our discussion round, also to include the publishing houses. Sönke Reimers is speaker of the management of DFV Media Group. This is a media group who publish expert essays from agricultural newspapers to gambling to stock lotto, whatever is there. But you also have different tasks. You are here as the CEO of the public media and also of the Free Press Association. And among the many things you do, I tried to open your CV here with your profile, but it was almost impossible to read everything. You have many voluntary offices. You are the CEO of the theater publishing house. And despite the euphoria, you seem to still believe in the traditional media, right? Yes, more than ever, actually. I think this must not be a contradiction. It's not an either-or. Of course, we can do a lot with AI, but it's more like we use it for editing assistance or writing assistance. And on the other hand, we have many options in order to take care and look after the things that make a text a good text and stories and do this work rather than the other work. And all this preparation and the briefing is done by AI maybe, and we can take care of the research and the writing, the creative work. So from this point of view, I'm a big fan. And also, well, even if not a big fan, a good user of AI, it can help here. So we are in a special position because we publish 99% of stories, and we know DPA and other agencies, but we produce almost exclusively our own content where we have our own rights. But my colleague, Mr. Döpfner, actually has not published what he intends to do within the next 5 years. He said a new era of journalism is about to dawn, but I'd rather say that it is the other way around. We see that stories in areas that are researched by journalists are maybe only 10%. And I have to tell you, I've worked for Springer for 10 years. I don't know if these odds are calculated correctly. But what I can say is that if the framework conditions are right, we can do a lot using AI. And this brings about our last guest. You know about the challenges Mr. Reimers has just described. You are a specialist lawyer for copyright and media law at BVPA, and you work also for this Federal Association of Professional Images. And you are sort of our legal anchor here today when we talk about the borders of the usability, the applicability of AI. And I hope that you can also structure a little bit the legal aspects and tell us about. But you also work a little bit as a publisher. You run the right of image, of your own image, which is a platform where, and we talk about the content which can be automized, but even before you started to study, when you finished school, you worked in Paris at Lizard Entertainment, one of the biggest developers and game offerers. And in the world of Warcraft, you developed something here. And I worked there too. I had a little job there too. So maybe the two of us have met before without knowing it. And you fought the unjust, right? Well, like every other child, I tried to. But I have to say that this actually was the introduction into this profession. I started for the gamers industry, and across these borders, the relations between Asia and Europe they had, I worked with and for the people and in the legal sector. And I was fascinated by what legal persons can achieve. Of course, Lizard also applied a lot of automatic processes. If there was something to do, it was much easier to ask a computer or a program to do this instead of a person. And this is something that is very, very significant or characteristic for the industry, the computer industry. Quite often AI is to replace human beings, but in the end it is about simplifying your work. Take the burden off people's shoulders. It is about what is legally okay, what is ethically okay, and we look at what we can achieve at German or EU level, preferably also at a world level, what we can do here in order to keep things in the right legal framework. So it would be nice to achieve all this.
Well, dealing with people and dealing with the regulatory issues is always important. So the book is threatened by automation, so it's great that you're dealing with this topic, but you are, otherwise you wouldn't be here today, and maybe our discussion were different. So it's about the copyright owned by the authors in times of automation. And Ms. Falkenhagen, you have to explain. There is quite a threat here. So is this the time for the next machine storm or the next industrial action? And will we all be jobless very soon or unemployed? Well, great that I have to start dealing with this. Well, yes and no. So artificial intelligence, the algorithm as the creator, question mark. It's good to have a question mark here. So all the text that Springer Publishing House, for example, has published by way of AI, they are not protected by copyright, and there is no legal framework to do anything against this. Maybe Mr. Wagenknecht can explain this later on. And, well, you referred to the strike of the Writers Guild. Well, these colleagues are organized extremely well. You cannot work without being organized in a trade union. I would hope we'd have the same situation in Germany. Well, if you have a problem as an author, please contact us. We organize authors, and we also take care of the protection of your copyright against AI. As a matter of fact, it's time to think of how AI can be regulated, because the way it is structured at the moment, it is stealing the intellectual property of authors, and in the near future, it will really interfere with literature, for example, with creativity. So, in other words, if we don't start regulating now, and I can tell you what kind of proposals we have, okay, well, we will deal with this later on. Otherwise, I won't stop talking, I know. But I'm quite pessimistic when it comes to the world of culture. I think that graphic designers, authors, and so on are under a lot of pressure, and this will become worse. That's interesting. And this issue does not only have a creative view, but also a technical and legal view. So you have a technical background. So can you understand this concern? And would you say this is the last book I wrote, or is there still more to come? Well, I can understand because, well, I was a student of economics, and in labor market research, we looked at the potential of replaceability. That is, in how far can the machine replace man? And I have never regarded technology as technology only, but I always included the social aspects. This is what my book is about. Thinking in fair terms for a fair society. If you work in the world of tech and work in the area of data science, this is what I did. I developed machine learning models, and most of the time you don't ask these questions. It's about sticking to what is required. Top management tells you what kind of product features need to be launched as quickly as possible. You work under a lot of time pressure. Once every 2 weeks, something new has to be launched. And this is why you don't have any time to deal with issues like these. Now, when I develop an algorithm and look at the training data record, I do not spend a lot of time thinking about the so-called bias, a distortionary effect. I don't think about what effect this may have regarding certain professions. However, in 2023, the situation has changed because within the AI community, Geoffrey Hinton, for example, quite famous, who is the great-grandfather, so to say, of neuronal networks, or OpenAI CEO Sam Altman, who approached the US committee and asked for AI regulation. But even though we have started looking into regulatory and philosophical aspects, and this was an absolute must. And this is political reality, you know. This is not a maybe. This is not an option. If we look at the EU AI Act, this is the first AI regulation that we will see in Europe, and the Digital Service Act, which will enter into force next year, and will make sure that you have to clearly mark AI-generated content. Okay, Ms. Seitze, we heard that not everybody will be unemployed because of AI, but she mentioned where regulation is required. Well, we heard it before. It's rather late already. So the ordinary citizen at the end of last year, because of ChatGPT, got an inkling of what this is all about, what it means, and it keeps developing. If you want to take action, you need to get started now. The initiative for the right of for the copyright has started taking action, and we just heard the AI Act is something where maybe you can cover some issues if it's not too late already. When it comes to the copyright, we have the copyright directive, but it will only enter into force 2 years from now, if at all. So we are running out of time, also legally speaking. Okay, you say, yes, there's an initiative, but it's rather late. Mr. Reimers, you say you're not that much concerned because you say the content you produce, 90% of it is original content. So you're not concerned about the automation of contents for your publications. Is that right? Basically, yes, you're right. But what you referred to, well, this is, or that the camel has to pass. And maybe we are a little naive because we think, well, everything will end well, and we don't have the steep learning curve that is required if we think of what has happened in terms of digitalization over the last 20, 30 years. Everything that can be digitized will be digitized, no doubt about it. You may like it, you may not like it, but you will have to deal with it. So the question is, what do I do? Copyright-related questions crop up. I have some basic questions as well, such as who is allowed to use AI for what? Who is allowed to publish AI-based media offers? Or who has to use AI? Who is forced to use AI, even if he or she doesn't want this? Well, but once I'm a monopolistic platform, am I allowed to publish AI-based contents? Or should we say, no, you're not supposed to do so? So a lot of legal, philosophical questions and transatlantic questions, I would say. And I think we need a lot of dialogue between Europe and the United States. And at the end of the day, I think it's not only legal questions, it's rather political questions in this vast context of media and the context of law, up to security. If we want to come to grips with the GAFAs, we need to understand what is happening in the Western world, politically speaking. So, well, this was a very political answer in two ways. Also, when it comes to the bandwidth you mentioned. But what does it mean for you as a publishing house? Isn't AI an opportunity? Because everybody says this is great. Well, 90% content that we own for more than 90 years. We have well-maintained archives. These are treasure boxes. And when it comes to what about the archives we own that we need to protect now? Because what you mentioned in the beginning, what was it? 12 million images are just used in order to train AI. So this is a question we need to answer as well. When talking to major suppliers about our content, we tend to say, oh no, let's leave it. We don't want to do it. But developing products of our own, using it as a basis, this is something I consider very exciting. But these are our rights. We own them and we will not share them with anybody. Especially not with the platforms. Well, Ms. Falkenhagen, how do you perceive this as an author? Would you develop your own server in order to, well, process your own data? Well, not really. I'm very much digitized. I also work in the area of computer games. I'm very open-minded, technically speaking. Maybe more than other authors, I don't know. But I would not develop my own server. And we don't have a situation where authors are no longer required, where graphic designers are no longer required for AI. We keep hearing that people will have to look for other jobs in this area. This is not true. Generative AI always needs new human input. Otherwise, the model will collapse. Well, why? Because relative AI only refers to AI-generated content. And you see this already. ChatGPT, I think, is 2 years old, this data record. And AI learn more from AI-generated text because there are so many. So the text quality will deteriorate. We need a continuous flow of copyright-protected creative human texts. And irrespective of the fact that 12 million images and the text that were the basis for ChatGPT, this is a copyright scandal at top level because the texts sometimes are texts from Facebook protocols, from chat protocols of young people. And they were all included in the training programs for AI. Illegally acquired texts no author, no photographer was asked, and Getty Images sues Meta, Google, and others. Several authors sue these companies as well to make it very clear that this is a copyright scandal at top level. And what generative AI does is it imitates. So data which become part of the models are being fragmented, and then you have the black box where, if I'm not mistaken, technicians don't really know what generative AI does with these data records, and at the other end you have some result. So I say the data were acquired illegally. Secondly, nobody asked us. We need transparency regarding the data. And I think everything has to be deleted and redeveloped in order to have this type of transparency. Then transparency, we need an opt-in, i.e. only legally acquired texts which are meant to be used for training will be used for training. We need remuneration for these texts. And in the beginning, we need transparency, and then we need to make sure that it is revealed that the text was created by AI. I think you, the public, have the right to understand, is this an AI-based product or not? I want to understand, for example, what news was only developed by an AI system, which translation was developed by an AI system, and which was created by a human being. Now, as an author, do you have any entitlement regarding the result? And here, I need your opinion, legally speaking and technically speaking. What does it look like? How much author is still included in the product? Is this like a food processor where you press a button and you have 100,000 jigsaw puzzle parts and you say, these 3 words belong to me? These 3 words belong to me. Could you give us an idea how AI treats a data record?
You have to imagine a huge quantity of data, similar to cooking. I have my cooking pot. I throw in all my ingredients from different sources, be it Twitter, Reddit, content of authors. I put these into my cooking pot, which is my data infrastructure, actually, and then I have to process the data. Same as with cooking. I don't like raw carrots. I need to process them. I better like cooked carrots. So I do this as soon as I have analyzed the data. I've made a meal out of them. And at the end of the day, it's a data-based service or a product. And how to process everything is well backed by mathematics and statistics, and this is how I came into this field. I think these things are described in a very fancy way, but basically it's mathematics we've partly learned at school. You have a linear regression. The simplest algorithm is linear regression. Any one of you remembering the math courses and classes? Okay, good. But anyway, it strongly depends on how we do the mathematical models for it. We have input, output, and connected. But sometimes we have very complex machine learning models where you cannot just simply use linear regressions, but we talk about deep learning here. These are much more complex models who were simulated similar to our brains. And you can see it like this. This big data quantity, which is difficult to process on computers, are separated in smaller blocks and will be processed then. And the results sometimes even for the people who work in this area, is sometimes not really understandable, and you don't know where it all came from. And then we call it black box AI. And in order to create transparency and a way to persecute or understand what was happened, it is very important to set up monitoring. This is what the EU requires. Here you need the quality standards and the control standards. And the forecasting is included here, the error rate, for example, in recognition of persons or in the recognition of contents. Mr. Wagenknecht, please give us your point of view on this from your perspective. I would like to pick up the carrot here, the metaphor, but the cooked carrot, of course. Could we say that my carrot is cooked? Let's say I want my share of my carrot from a legal point of view, or do I have to give way to it? Well, it sounds nice that you want to have your share of your carrot. I like the metaphor of this cooking recipe because everyone can see how it works using ChatGPT. For example, I enter 3 commands or prompts for ChatGPT to give out an answer, but for 3 inputs, I also get, for 3 same inputs, I get 3 different answers. So if I let 3 different persons cook the recipe, a different meal will be produced. So this is debatable from a legal point of view. Of course, as a prompt engineer, which has become a real profession, by the way, if a person enters this in ChatGPT, so I tell, with my prompt, I say, please create or tell me a story. Then I don't have the ownership, the copyright law. If I tell a goodnight story to my children, it will always end with a person looking for the ring. And you can continue this with whole sentences, texts, stories. And here the question starts, can AI be the author? But the prompt engineer, the more he enters, can the prompt engineer be the author, the person with a copyright? And people say, no, it's actually like with the black box AI, you don't know the result of it, you can try and influence it. But it's not only about prompting, but also about the way the software was trained, the algorithm. So what can the software do here? If AI gives something, makes an output, you cannot find the owner, actually. It doesn't belong to anyone, but to all. Well, can we not say hard cheese here for everyone? You cannot find and split the carrot and say, this is your carrot share and this is yours. But it is like this in reality, actually. And the more important it is to have these protective fences and that we look at the question, what is my content? Who may work with my content? That is a very decisive phase we are in right now. And it is important that we do this. And at the moment, it's underestimated. Well, if I may answer to this, we have to take a different perspective here. I know that copyright law works in a different way, but we have to see that at the end of the output, we see, there is a taste of carrot, so there must be carrot in it. And then we go backwards, and now the metaphor will not work anymore with the carrot, but for example, Kalina George was put in AI, and Nina George's text can be imitated, then there must be Nina George inside this. And it's also browser-based, that you can check whether you have landed up in an AI machine or not. It works into authors who were translated into English, Karin Seitz, Sebastian Fitzek, and so on, who were translated into English. But to put it simply, if we don't stop it here and build this protective fence, it will never stop. We have to stop it, however. Let me distinguish between two things. Mr. Wagenknecht said it. The one question is how much is inside of my original text or product? And then if the new author who wrote the prompt is also involved, what is the remaining share of my input and product? So we have to talk about the people who gave their ideas. The 12 million Getty images that are used to train Dutch language models and so on, or picture databases. How can we depict a constructive future with these machines? It is highly improbable that in the future the authors will not use AI. And I have to say, I don't know many people who write with a fountain pen, but because technology is simply there and will be used. The regulatory things are important here. How about regulation for this prompt engineer question or the prompt question? Well, there is no regulation for this point, not much at least. It is said, at least in the German-speaking area and also a little bit on the European area and level, that we have existing copyright laws. However, they are almost decades to centuries old, and this is what makes it hard. We have to try and work through these laws because they don't cover the current situation. And if we want to do something here, we have to do it now. There is no future imaginable without AI. We have to see what would AI be without the owners, the authors. And remuneration must be set up here, quotas, and these questions exactly have to be answered. And what will the users do? What happens to the user? Is there not something similar, not only in copyright law, but in other legal areas where we think it makes sense? We talked about the directive that will come up maybe within 2 years, the next one, the copyright directive. But at the moment, we don't see a chance to improve it here. So I have to say, prompting is out of this legal discussion and direction at the moment. However, it may be included quickly. If I, for myself, I'm a little bit, I have more knowledge than before this meeting, and I will take this into my bodies in the company, into the bodies working with this. At the moment, we don't discuss it, but it will be important in the future. And also you can not only see it from a copyright point of view, but also as a user. I see the need for regulation, and the consumer must understand what is it here. Is this an original content from a person, or what is it? And we have not talked about this actually. And this is important. And also here, what do you want to read? I have S. Kagan's book here. This is something AI cannot produce, I have to tell you. This is an author from Frankfurt who lived among homeless people in Portland, and she created a book out of her 6 months there. And how can AI do this? Or imagine lyricists, you name them. Do you want to read poems or lyric works that was produced by AI? I don't want AI producing poems that are adjusted with my state of mind, of course. This is important from a consumer's point of view. It is about consumer protection. And how can we deal with this? This is very a burning topic and interesting. There are limits to the language models on the market, and many of them, most of them come from US offerers, such as OpenAI. And it is so easy for them to generate a work of literature in English. But if we want to do the same thing in German, it is boring. It is not as interesting. And this is another question for the future. How can digital sovereignty look like? Because at the moment, many of our future technologies are developed independent in a dependence of American cloud software offerers without us knowing this. And at the same time, our warfare is sort of transposed into the digital space, and we are not independent as Europe. We have never been independent, and we will never be independent, Europe, from the US, because we have failed miserably in cloud projects such as Gaia X, initiated by Peter Altmaier, and now another trial is set up with European language models on the part of the AI Federation here, which is also very interesting. But how can we protect our economic special location, our scientific location as Germany? And the UK is much further here, where as part of their AI strategy, they have set up a computer program or programs, and they invest 800 million pounds in order to invent their own language models, their own computers, because they see that British English requires a different language model than American English. And language is in the future where we consider language more precious than before, and we think this is important. Well, I am from Lower Saxony, and if I go to Berlin, and I think it is very important to find a common language model in the everyday language, of course. So I saw that there is a lot of need to talk. Frau Falkenhagen.
Well, let me refer back to the copyright idea and copyright as such. Please correct me if I'm wrong, because we keep talking about the creation and the amount of creation. It doesn't matter how much creativity is involved, whether or not it's copyright protected. Let me give an example. When it comes to the recipe, we talk about your pan and the ingredients. You cannot protect this, 3 carrots, 5 potatoes, maybe some pumpkin, and then you have a nice soup. You cannot protect it because it's an instruction to cook something. What you can protect is the description. For example, peel and cut the potatoes, peel and cut the carrots, and so on. The text. This can be protected, and very often the degree of creativity is not very high. It's no lyricism, it's no literature, but it is protected by copyright law. So 2 things will happen. The users, the consumers, the citizens are confused because so far texts somebody wrote were protected by copyright. In future, once they are created by AI, this principle no longer applies in a strict way because it's not protected by copyright, and this is why AI-created texts need to be marked as AI-created texts. Well, I forgot what I was going to say. Well, the creative output is something that we should protect, but also texts written by humans. I basically refer to text because this is my area of expertise. I think the copyright-based text is still protected no matter how much creativity is included. But I fear we are discussing the degree of creativity because AI is taking care of the rest. What is your opinion? Many texts can be protected by copyright. In copyright, we talk about the small coin of copyright, and even if not a lot of creativity is included, it can be protected still. the more influence from the outside, maybe the lower the degree of protectability. But once you add your own input, you can assume this will be protected by copyright. Putting myself in the shoes of a user, I think transparency is very important. You just mentioned the example of a text. And quite recently, yesterday and this morning, I saw on Twitter the war in Gaza, and all of a sudden on Twitter, there was an image of a burned dead baby. AI, Twitter said so, AI said this is not a real photograph. This was a picture created by different AI. And, well, the Twitter community was up in arms because you don't really know what is AI and what's authentic, what was created by a human being, by a human journalist. And you have to clearly show AI, this cannot be protected, and if the originator is a human being, you need to protect it. But it needs to be technically readable, not only by a human being, but by a machine, maybe NFTs or a symbol or what have you, a trademark, whatever. Adobe Content Authenticity Initiative, for example, where you have this interior symbol and where you can add this to photographs, for example, to make sure that people understand what kind of steps of manipulation or processing were taken in order to fight this tendency in the digital space. Okay, let me try to understand whether we have a microphone for Ms. Brink, who probably wants to make a contribution. I'm very sorry that we weren't able to open the discussion, but we had such a lively discussion, and I think everything was so exciting, so we only have time for one comment from the audience. I'm from Initiative Urheberrecht. We are the umbrella organization or association for everybody who wants to have their works protected by copyright. I'm very grateful to this initiative and to the presenter today. The copyright directive did solve several problems. Looking at what is happening now, some approaches are not the correct ones. I don't want to go into much detail, but there is some repair work required. The EU Parliament is working on the AI Act, and we hope that the transparency will be brought about. Germany and France somehow put obstacles in our way, but now we have made some progress, and I think that at least the transparency will be implemented and in Brussels at this level. And I agree, especially to Ms. Seitze, we need more EU regulation, we need another directive. But let me remind you, I think yesterday we read that the G7 developed so-called 11 commandments to monitor AI, and I think this was an enormous step forward. I wouldn't have expected this from the G7. And finally, all of our authors, musicians, dancers, authors, and so on, use AI tools, obviously, and they will never give it up again. What we are referring to is generative AI. This is where we put up warning signs. And Mr. Reimers, socially speaking, this is a major problem. Great. But G7, I think, is the proper level to find rules and regulations. Yes, very, very briefly. Well, this is the level that we really need. When we think of Germany, looking at the German copyright, if we take it to the US or Asia, they say, so what? We don't care. So this is a wrong mindset, and we have to open it up globally. This is, how interconnected we are all over the world, not only in Germany or Europe. Okay, referring to Ms. Zeitzi, I warn against copying the American economy. The values we have in Europe and copyright and the Digital Services Act are part of this. These advantages we have, to give them up to the benefit of technical progress that we will never be able to copy 100%. We will not be able to do so for umpteen reasons. So we need to protect the values that we have in Germany and Europe. Well, a passionate statement. Now the final words. Well, I don't think we are copying this. I look at it as opening up and cooperating, because these international companies are so powerful. If we look at the risk capital that we receive from there in Europe, also we see that new tech companies, well, not a lot of new tech companies are established here. Most of them go to Israel, the US, or China. But looking at the debate, I fully agree with what you said. Technology is never neutral because it's man-made, and our understanding of values needs to be questioned on the basis of the international context. We think that China, is living in the past when it comes to these rights. Well, they are not, because they want to become a superpower, and they started developing rules and regulations many, many years ago. And our own understanding of the world order needs to be questioned. We need to understand how we can negotiate with other countries at eyes level. Let me put it in a nutshell. We need rules and regulations. We are facing up to a lot of challenges. We need to find these rules and regulations together. And we have to make sure that we don't give up our values. I hope this wraps up your perspectives. But, well, this is a debate that doesn't stop here. We will deal with it for several years. Maybe we can turn this into a series panel. I'd enjoy this, because I did enjoy today's panel. Thank you very much for sharing your ideas. Thank you to all of you who attended this panel. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you can take something home. You have to do a lot of walking at the book fair. I hope you were able to take a rest here and enjoy the rest of the book fair. Thank you.